Hiya, it's Lynn, and today will be part 2 of It's a Kid Cat Origin Rewrite by Cove_XOXO, read by Stormfeld Podfics. I'm sorry it took me so long to get this out. I was sick, and then I got a small break from being sick, then I was sick again with something else, and then the holidays happened, and I'm sorry, but let's just get into it. Izuku wasn't sure why the man had picked him up. Could there be a chance Eraser had seen him shift? Izuku had thought the man would be too out of it at that moment for it to fully get through to him. Had he been wrong? Then again, would that really be so bad? Since the beginning, Izuku had tried to show him that he wasn't actually a cat, but back then he wasn't able to. At some point in time, Izuku had just forgotten that his life like this, wasn't normal, wasn't how it was supposed to be. It could be so much more if he just had a little help. Izuku came back to reality at the voice of Eraser. It didn't register to him what the man had said, but Izuku looked around and saw the alley that he'd been staying in. He had been put down on the still ever-present container, Eraser standing not too far away from him. It seems the man noticed that his words went unheard because he spoke again.
"Okay, kid. I saw you, so turn back from me."
Izuku wondered for a moment. Should he do this? Then again, wasn't this what he had wanted from the start? For them to know? So, Izuku obliged. He turned back into himself. Shoto was absolutely done with this. He's walking back to the alley with the cat he had saved from the collapsed building 9 years ago, because he thought he saw it change into a person while his vision was blurry and barely focused on anything else but the villain. Still, he stayed adamant.
"Okay, kid. I saw you, so turn back from me,"
he told the cat. The cat. He was talking to a cat. He did that often to his own cats. He had talked to this cat before. That wasn't the weird thing about this. He was expecting an answer back from said cat, which didn't do anything. He decided he could ask once more, and if it didn't do anything, then he'd tell himself that he had imagined it in the heat of the moment. But the cat shifted into a human form. And, oh goodness, Eraser immediately knew what he had signed up for. They had known the kid from the collapsed building, the one they weren't able to find, had a cat quirk. But they were told that he had ample control over it and usually couldn't switch on command. So they had ruled out the option of looking for a cat, which now seemed like the stupidest thing they've ever done. This could have been handled so many years earlier had they just tried. This kid looked young for his age. And small. If he remembers correctly, this child was 4 when he went missing, so he should be 13, though he looked around 11 or 10. Shoto began asking the kid, still sitting on the container, some questions he most likely already knew the answer to.
"What's your name, kid?"
In turn, the kid stared at him for a moment before, ever so slightly, tilting his head to the right. Shoto waited for a few moments longer before deciding the kid probably didn't want to tell him his name, possibly because he was anxious about this. Maybe he would open up to answering other questions.
"Okay, if you're not gonna tell me your name, could you tell me what you were doing out there? You do know vigilantism is illegal, right?"
The boy looked at him, head tilting further to the right, and his blank expression from before morphing into one of confusion. Shoto turned his voice of words over in his head until there was something, or was there something he pronounced wrong? Did he say a sentence that didn't quite roll well? But he couldn't pinpoint the problem until he realized that this kid most likely stopped learning new vocabulary at age 4. Would a 4-year-old know what vigilantism was? Would a 4-year-old know that you need a license to do hero work? That you didn't just start when you wanted to and become a hero? Probably not. But then again, the kid still wasn't speaking at all. He wasn't telling Shoto that he didn't know what he meant. He wasn't telling Shoto to word it differently. Wasn't speaking at all.
"Can you talk?"
he asked the kid. In return, the kid shook his head. He probably forgot to speak over the years of being silent, having no one to talk to. He had learned something he was still learning. Averagely, some sounds are only fully mastered at ages 7 or 8, and actually understanding time sequence, ongoing conversations, and complex sentences at age 5. Shoto sighed. before he helped the kid get off the container he never moved from. As the kid stood in front of him, he crouched down to be eye level with him.
Can you write?
The kid smiled and nodded, which caused a small smile to creep up Shada's own lips.
Good. Follow me,
he told the kid, and he started walking towards his house. He looked behind him to see the kid struggling to walk. He walked like a toddler. Had he been inside of his cat body for so long he never developed walking skills either? This kid had a ton of catching up to do. He kept checking in on the kid walking behind him from time to time. One time he didn't see the kid anymore. He stopped and looked around for him. Then he felt something at his ankle. He looked down to find the kid in his cat body. It's probably an easier walk like that for the kid, so even though Eraser wanted him to keep going as a human and try to learn to walk normally like that, he let the kid have his piece with walking like a cat, and something in Shota found it too cute to tell him to switch back. Izuku was walking with Eraser into an apartment, which he assumed was owned by Eraser himself. There were more cats there, 3 of them, but these were actual cats. They didn't really like him when he walked into the room, because they all went behind a door and watched from there. Izuku sat in the door opening of the living room and watched as Eraser grabbed a piece of paper and a pen. The man sat down, and with that he made a movement with his hands to tell Izuku that he should too. Izuku sat down at the table, an actual table, not a rock, or park bench, or halfway rotten picnic bench. No, this was a real dining table. Izuku hadn't sat at an actual table for probably years, though he wasn't sure how many. When he got out of his daydreaming state, he saw Eraser sitting at the other side of the table, the same spot he'd been in when he gestured Izuku to sit, but this time Izuku saw something different too. The paper and pen were in front of him now, and Eraser looked at him with a waiting expression. Shota waited for the boy to come back down to earth on his own terms, rather than snapping him out of it. In the meantime, he opted for laying the piece of paper and pen in front of the cat. Shota was having a real mental crisis about what exactly to call him, but now he saw that he was back down to earth, so he started.
Alright, I'll start from the beginning, he said, and he saw that the kid, he will just call him Kid for while he is in his human form, cocked his head to the side, probably in interest, but even so he could never be sure of what was going on inside someone's head. Can you write down your name for me?
He asked. He should know how to write his name, even at 4, or perhaps he was still learning to write it. Shota wasn't sure how long the kid had been 4 before he stopped learning. He could have been close to 5, or barely 4, for all he knew but the kid surprised him. The handwriting was exceptional for someone who hadn't been taught properly since elementary. Of course, the big and small letters were mixed in with each other, and the letters looked a bit wonky, but the kid looked proud of it, and it was surprisingly readable. Shota had seen teenagers with worse handwriting. Focusing less on the lettering and more on what was written made Shota's heart drop. It was exactly what he had thought. Izuku. Now, his memory of first names was not the best, but he was goodness sure that that was the name of the kid that they had been looking for 9 years. Because of his memory, he couldn't help but ask,
What about your last name?
The kid thought for a while, but still went to write down the answers, and what came back doubly confirmed Shota's initial theory. It's him, Midoriya. It was spelled wrong, but Shota knew what he meant.
Do you mean?
He said as he took the pen and paper for himself for a bit. He wrote down the name he knew the case had, Midoriya. The kid looked up at him while he was writing. He hadn't even noticed it until he looked up to meet the teen's eyes. He slid the paper over to the kid, Midoriya, and turned it around for him to be able to read it. Midoriya lit up at the word. Why? Shota wasn't sure, but Midoriya held his hand out, seemingly waiting for him to give back the pen. Shota obliged. And once the pen was back in the kid's hands, he started writing again. I knew I spelled it wrong. Shota let out a soft chuckle as he read what Midoriya had written down. He had known he spelled it wrong, but didn't know how else to spell it. It made him wonder why he had spelled it the way he had, but he didn't question it further.
He had more important questions to ask first. Maybe one day he would ask him, "How old are you?" Even though he knew Midoriya was 13, the question was, did Midoriya know that he was 13? No. This kid had no idea how many years had gone by, didn't even know how long the world had neglected him, how long he'd been utterly alone next to the visits Shota and Tsukauchi paid him, not even his own age. Shota took a deep breath before asking his main question. He had wanted to take the kitten he had saved that first home, that first day, but he hadn't. He wanted his husband to be okay with it first, mainly because they already had 3 cats. Sashi had told him that there was probably some relative of his old owner looking for him, and if he wasn't showing any signs of not being cared for, he could take it home. But the kitten always looked healthy. He always looked well-groomed, well-kept. The only thing Shota did was give him food and milk whenever he saw him. Every now and then he brought a tick brush, but he never had ticks, neither as a kitten nor as an adult cat. So Shota assumed there was already someone doing that for him. Shota took him to the vet once, asking if the kitten had been chipped. He hadn't, and it made all so much more sense now. The kid could take care of himself, even though he was definitely malnourished. He was decently clean for someone living on the streets. He had no lice or ticks. He didn't reek too much of mud and sweat, and he didn't have any uncared for wounds on his body, as if someone had been taking care of him while he was in human form. But now Shota wasn't so sure. "Has anyone been taking care of you?" Shota asked Midoriya. The kid cocked his head to the right again, a recurring trait that Shota notices now he also did as a cat. Always to the right, too, never to her left. Shota couldn't help but give a light smile at that. This kid was still looking at him. He hadn't written down anything yet, and Shota began thinking Midoriya hadn't heard him. He opened mouth to say something again, but Midoriya looked away, seemingly deep in thought. Maybe he didn't know how to write the name again, the man thought. Like that, he started thinking of what the kid would write down as his final answer. Maybe it was his grandmother or grandfather, and they let him play outside for as long as he'd like, because that's usually what cats do. Maybe an aunt or an uncle that are still trying to figure out how to take care of a kid. Maybe a family friend who couldn't always be at home because of a busy job. Maybe a knock-knock. Shota looked up. It was the kid who had knocked on the table. He was done writing. Shota held his tears at the revolution that the paper held. "You eraser." Nobody had been taking care of him. It had only been him, probably Tsukauchi too, and the kid didn't know how to write his name, even if he knew his name at all. And Midoriya himself, to take care of him. He knew he had to take this up with the police now. He also knew that his husband had to be on board too, but to this kid, Shota had already been his new guardian ever since he saved him, ever since the man had gotten him freed from his paw was stuck in the rubble. But there was another question. "Why didn't you show yourself to us before?" Midoriya was writing for a while again. "I was stuck as a cat." That explained all he needed to know. Now it was time to call Hisashi and inform him about a certain cat, and then Tsukauchi about that same cat. Time for the adoption process to start. There were a lot of problems, even after they had passed through the process. But during it, there were also a lot of them. Well, with Hisashi meeting Midoriya, the kid was skeptical to a degree that was almost concerning. After 3 days of Midoriya basically avoiding Hisashi, they decided to ask him what Hisashi had done wrong. They were not prepared for the daddy issues that came with that question. A father who left because his son had a so-called weak quirk, even though it was the same quirk he had. Apparently Midoriya Hisashi had hoped his kid would get a combination of cat and telekinesis, or telekinesis quirk that was stronger than his mother's. The inability to talk was only the cherry of hatred on top of the disappointment cake.
Hisashi, blessed with his amazing ability to deal with kids, hugged Midoriya close after he was done writing it down. Midoriya told the kid that he deserved better than that and reassured him that he would always be there if Midoriya had any problems. He told Midoriya how he really cared for him, not just for his work or for his dreams of being a hero or film writer, or with new input from Shota himself praising the kid for his ability to analyze quirks at rapid speed, a quirk analyst. But the conversation didn't stop there. I will always be here for you, Midoriya, even if you don't want me to. I will always take care about you. Those were the words Hisashi uttered while holding Midoriya at arm's length so he could look the kid in his eyes while he was saying them. Midoriya, in turn, turned to the paper and pen that were still in front of him, the ones he had used to explain his past with his father. He took the pen and started writing. Izuku was fine. And with that out of the way, they had the cats. All three of them didn't seem to like Izuku very much, and most of the time, Izuku just ignored them. But apparently that was the best decision Izuku could have made regarding the cat's skepticism. Whatever that. Sorry, I can't speak very well. It took only about 2 weeks for the cats to want to try to interact with Izuku, most likely realizing that he wasn't going to be leaving soon. After the adoption process was done, and they had signed the adoption papers, Izuku was officially on paper Izuku Uezawa Yamada. They opted to use both last names so they could choose which one to use depending on the situation. Their last names weren't too known to the public, even though they are pro heroes, with Hisashi ranking within the top 20. Shota was underground, so his last name would never be recognized by anyone else but pro heroes that have worked with him, or students he had taught at UA. So in public, Izuku would go by Aizawa, but Izuku wanted to go to UA, in which case they decided when it came to it they would use Yamada, since Hisashi just mainly went as President Mike, or to students Mike Sensei. Shota had taken Izuku to the hospital as well to take a look at his vocal cords, since Izuku was adamant he couldn't speak, and neither of the men had heard a single sound come from his mouth. In the waiting room, however, Izuku had asked why they were at the hospital. Shota hadn't wanted to tell the kid because he already knew Izuku would tell him that he wouldn't be able to talk, ever, which he did. They'll just take a quick look at your vocal cords to see if you could still be relearning to talk, the man explained. He looked over to Izuku. He looked back at him with an unimpressed expression before blowing Shota's mind with his voice. Meow. The test came back to tell them that Izuku wouldn't be able to talk because his quirk came with cat vocals. Why didn't you say anything about this before? I told you I can't talk. You didn't tell me that you could only talk like a cat, Izuku. Why? Scared. Izuku appeared to be scared that they wouldn't want him because he could only talk like a cat. Honestly, he should have known. His biological father left him because of it, so that must have left some damage. But Shota had hoped that this wouldn't become a pattern. He reassured Izuku that he didn't need to fear that they would give up on him over anything. Told him that he could always come to them if he needed them, and that conversation ended with a happy understanding nod from Izuku. They came to the physical therapy. Izuku had to learn to walk as a human. At first, Shota and Hisashi had tried to teach him on their own, but they very quickly realized that they did not know how to explain to a 13-year-old how to walk. So, a professional physical therapist it is. Izuku went there 5 days a week for 2 hours, Monday through Friday, and on weekends he was tasked to walk around the block as a human with the practice they had done. They started with a 5-minute walk, which was long enough for Izuku to start with, but they quickly moved on to 10 minutes, and then 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then an hour. They knew Izuku wouldn't be able to really walk how he was supposed to, but to help But to help that, he got braces for his hips, knees, and ankles to help him. Ezekiel didn't really want to learn everything he'd missed out on, and he was a quick learner. Ezekiel did really want to learn everything he'd missed out on, and he was a quick learner. Shota and Hisashi homeschooled him, and they were able to do it themselves in many subjects. They could do math, writing, English, but for Japanese they had to hire someone that specialized in teaching the language because for some parts of it, the two men had no idea how to explain it. Every now and then, they would also get a math coach to test Ezekiel on what level of math he was on, and every time he made great progress. They also hired a writing coach to help Ezekiel with how his hands should move while writing, but they only did that twice because Ezekiel seemed to have quite a bit of talent for writing. Once he entered UA High School in mixed courses, Hero and Gen Ed, Ezekiel was still on his way to catching up, but one day Shota is sure that Ezekiel could make it.
And that's all. I'm sorry you can hear my fan in the background, and I'm sorry if there's a lot of stuttering. I hope you enjoy. Leave those comments. Tell me what I can do better. Thank you for waiting. I'm sorry you had to wait for so long. I'll try to get a new video out soon. Thanks. Head over to AO3. Leave those kudos to support the original author. And thank you all so much for listening.